Hello, and welcome to the Specialty Matcha Podcast. My name is Ryan. This is my co-host Zongjun, who also goes by Sam.
Oh, hello.
And we're the co-founders of Sanko Matcha Products.
Yeah, we launched this podcast to discuss our learning journey in matcha, share startup stories, and interview experts. And today, we have Rocky Shu from Rocky's Matcha joining us. Welcome, Rocky.
Hey guys, what's going on? How are you?
Awesome, awesome. So, yeah, before we dive into all the questions, would you be able to share a little bit about your personal and professional background?
Yeah, so my name is Rocky Shu. I'm the founder of Rocky's Matcha. Started Rocky's Matcha a few years ago now. I'd say probably like 2022. Late 2022, we did our first pop-up, and it's been quite the ride. Obviously, matcha has seen a meteoric rise in the overall category, and I think we've been blessed to be a part of that. As far as professional journey, yeah, I mean, I've worked a number of jobs. I started my career in China, at Nike China, and then I actually moved to New York for a little bit, and then about 9 years ago, I moved to Los Angeles. So I've kind of lived all over the world, traveled quite a bit. Tokyo at this point now, just from going there so much for various things related to tea or just travel. Also feels like a second home. Ryan and I had a chance to meet randomly in a couple of different parts of the world, but the more recent time was in Paris, which also feels like, you know, another home away from home. But yeah, I guess, I hope that sums it up. But obviously we can get into any other questions that you guys might have or what have you.
Awesome. Yeah, we share some former like home bases because Zongjun lived in Jing'an in Shanghai for
Shanghai, yeah.
3 years, and we both lived in New York.
Yeah, I lived in Jing'an for
Oh,
like, I
Oh,
mean, almost 6 years.
oh, cool, cool. Wow.
Yeah.
it's overlapped.
Yeah,
We
we
might have.
definitely overlapped. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Awesome.
super cool.
Beautiful neighborhood.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess my first question was I would love to hear a bit more about the origin story of like what was the impetus? Like, I guess one, how did you get into matcha? And like how has it played a journey in your life? And then how did that manifest into Rocky Matcha, both at first and then how has that evolved?
Yeah, so I lived in New York from 2013 to 2016. At that time when I was living in New York, there was kind of like, I don't know if you want to call it like first wave of matcha cafes or matcha bars. Literally, matcha bar was one of the first places that I'd gone and gotten a matcha, and then obviously the guys from Cha Cha Matcha,
Yeah.
played a pretty big role in introducing matcha to millennial Gen Z, and you started to see more and more cafes carrying matcha around that time. So this is like 2014, 2015. So at that point, I obviously heard of matcha, assumed matcha, but it was by no means part of everyday life. It was very much kind of like, okay, go, to matcha bar, cha-cha matcha, get a matcha, whatever, and kind of go about your day. In 2000, I would say maybe a few months into the pandemic, I made the decision to go and do some energy work with this spiritual guide, energy healer. Some people might call him a shaman. And, something that friends of mine and former coworkers of mine had gone and said that it was, quite the experience. And at that point in time, I think a lot of us were cooped up at home and looking for different ways to pass time or maybe getting a little bit more spiritual or reading more books or cooking or all of the above, right? And so I went and sought him out, and we did some energy work. I'd say it was probably like a 3-4 hour experience all in all. And towards the end of the session, he kind of, decided, he was like, okay, I'm going to put you on a 21-day chakra cleanse. And he was like, there's certain things that you need to kind of adhere to. So there was no alcohol, no tobacco, no sex, etc. And I was like, okay, no problem. I'm at home by myself. Like all of this is fine. Like I didn't smoke to begin with, and I was never like I was never somebody that would ever drink by themselves, right? And so anyways, I'm like getting ready to leave and go about my day, and he goes, "Hey, there's one more thing." It's kind of like that famous like Steve Jobs. like,
Add
there's one
one.
more thing, right? And so he goes, "There's one more thing." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, like, what's up?" And he goes, "Hey, do you drink coffee?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, like 2, 3, 4 cups of coffee a day. Love going to, whatever coffee shop, get my Americano or cold brew or, whatever, right?" And he goes, "Yeah, okay. I think I need you to stop drinking coffee." And I was like, "As a part of this cleanse or like, what are we talking about?" And he was like, "No, no, no, no. Like, I think you should actually just consider giving up coffee like entirely." And I was just like, "All right, dude, like everything else we talked about today, like I'm pretty sure I can do. Like this giving up coffee thing, yeah, I don't know." And he was like, "No, just trust me." He was like, "It has a tendency to kind of like get you too high and too low." And like he was like, "I think it might be good for you to just stay a little bit more even keel." And I'm like, "Okay, all right, I'm willing to try everything once." But at that point, I'm like, I need to go get a coffee because like if he's telling me that I got to stop drinking coffee right now, I need to go have like one last coffee, right?
Probably your last one.
And yeah, and so he basically said, like, if you need caffeine, switch over to tea. You'll find that it's a little bit more calmer, it's smoother. There's not as much of that peak or there's not as much of the peak and valley of coffee. And I was like, okay, all right, like I'm down to give it. I'm always happy to give everything a try. And at that point in time at home, had somebody had sent me a matcha set or like a whisk and some matcha. And so I get home and I start making matcha and different types of tea, whether it's black tea, green tea. And I really found making a matcha every morning to be somewhat um therapeutic and very much like there was a ritual aspect of it. And so I found myself at that point in 2020 and, as we kind of like moved into 21 and 22, doing what a lot of people are doing now in terms of like seeking out high quality matcha, whether it's in Japan or other parts of the world, and buying it and getting it shipped back to the US via like FedEx, DHL, whatever, right? And so I was that person that I wasn't quite doing all of the matcha reviews, but I was buying a lot of the different matcha blends that I could find online, whether it was Ippoto or Maruki Koyaman or whoever. And I, was purchasing quite a bit of it and making matcha at home. And I would even go so far as to kind of like bring it with me when I traveled. Friends of mine started to notice, and one of my close friends, Paulo, who has a business partner in Japan, he one day was just like, "Hey, like you've been doing this corporate thing for a long time. Like, why don't you do your own thing? Like, have you ever thought about doing your own thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, nah, I don't. I'm like, I like the safety net of having a paycheck every 2 weeks, benefits, all that, right?" And he was like, "No, no, 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 but, like, you should think about, like, doing your own thing." He's like, "I know you got the matcha thing, like, why don't you just, do something with that?" He's like, me and his business partner is this, multi-hyphenate creative named Verdi." He was like, me and Verdi will support you, whatever you need, this, and that." And I was like, "Okay, like, if that's the case, like, maybe you guys can do the branding, we'll come up with the name, this and that." Fast forward a couple months, he goes, "Hey, like, would you wanna bring your matcha to this flea market that I'm starting?" And I was like, "I don't even have a name for this yet. I don't like, we have no branding, we have nothing. Like, I don't even know where I'm getting this product." At that point, I was just purchasing like product wherever I could and just kind of like, using that, right? Like, and it very much was not a business. And and Paulo was like, "Hey, like we have Henry's Pizza in Osaka, Japan. Henry's Pizza. There's no actual Henry, but it's Henry's Pizza." And then he's like, "And then I'm gonna have my mom do her empanadas at the flea market too. We're gonna call it Carmen's Empanadas." He's like, "Just call it Rocky's Matcha. You can always just change the name later." And I was like, "All
That would
right,
never
sure. Like
happen
we can
later.
we can change the name later." I'm not the type of person. Most of my close friends know that I'm not the type of person. I still have very much like a lot of imposter syndrome when it comes to like the fact that my name is on the product. But I think it's um generic or special enough of a generic and special enough of a name at the same time that it doesn't necessarily have to be me. So it's just like, oh, Rocky's Matcha. It's like you don't actually need the founder front and center. And I've tried to do that a little bit more. I would say over the last like few months is kind of create a little bit of distance. Here I am doing this podcast with you guys. But all that to say, Aki's Matcha started at my close friend Paulo's flea market called Central Flea. Him and his business partner Verdi did not have a chance to help with the branding. They were quite busy, and so I'd hit up another good friend of mine who now is a partner in the business, Max Arkin, to help me with the brand identity, and he did. And now it's been 3 years, and we've had to change the company from one entity to another entity, and we've gone through various different suppliers, and like we've seen the business sort of grow out of my apartment into an office, and now we're working with different types of people both in Japan, but I mean there's even someone in Paris that we work with. There's all sorts of different food facilities now here in Southern California that we're working with, and the journey has been a lot of fun. It's definitely stressful at times, but at the same time, I think there's nothing more rewarding than having something that is your own, and you're also able to provide for your employees, and give them an opportunity to learn and grow, and their livelihoods are sort of dependent on the trajectory of the business. But I mean, you guys know this from starting your own businesses and obviously
Yeah.
doing various things. So
Startup route.
yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Ryan.
Oh, super interesting. How
Yeah,
big's the
definitely.
team now? Just out of curiosity.
The team we're growing. I would say full time we have like 5 or 6 different people,
Wow.
and then with part time staff and contractors, and it varies month by month. But I would say if you're not including like kind of like professional services like accountant and lawyers and all that, we probably flex up to like somewhere between 10 and 15 every month
Oh,
with, like, contractors, and yeah. So, yeah, we have, uh we have a couple of folks in Japan helping us now, and yeah, business is definitely grown, but, I feel like anybody else in the matcha space, business has probably grown for the most part over the last, like, 9 to 12
wow.
months. So, yeah, we're definitely, I count my blessings every day, and I'm super grateful for, I guess you could say stumbling, across this this industry.
Super interesting. Well, I guess this is like very different from like your past corporate life, in Nikes and all those places. Did any of like those experience back in those large corporations help you build Rocky's Matcha, or like what's the different key
Yeah.
difference?
Yeah, I mean, so when I was at Nike, one of the departments that I worked in was a department called energy marketing. I think that name has kind of changed over the years, but energy marketing was by, I'm trying to think like by Nike standards, but also like just general marketing kind of, nomenclature. It was always meant to kind of find ways to extend the brand beyond what the brand actually like, was grounded in. So for Nike, it was sport, right? So as a person who worked in energy marketing, it was our job to go out and find ways to dimensionalize the brand beyond sport. And specifically, we look to fashion, food, design, art, culture, right? And I would say that, and thinking about how to extend the brand and take it to new places, and the idea of collaboration, these sort of things definitely helped me and Max think about how we wanted to position Rocky's Matcha. And, none of this is fabricated. Like it's all very much organic because Max and I have a lot of genuine interest beyond just matcha. I mean, Max is even caffeine sensitive, so he's not like drinking as much matcha as I am, but he's naturally, he comes from more like music and design space. I obviously come from more of like this sports brand, athletic performance slash, art, design slash fashion, whatever you want to call it, right? Space. And so I think the beauty of like the two of us working together on this is that like we've been able to take something that is sacred and, 1,000+ year old kind of product, and think about it a little differently, and not so much that like we want to bastardize it by any means. Like we want to, like shine a light on it. We just want to kind of do it through our own vantage point or perspective where we can hopefully take it somewhere new in a still very like authentic and grounded way. And so I would say like my time at Nike, spending time in a big organization, but also thinking about it from like the actual, specifics of my job have really helped me kind of think about Rocky's Matcha. And, we've been fortunate enough to work with some amazing brands in the short amount of time that we've been around. We've done stuff with Nike, we've done stuff with Louis Vuitton. This year we did something with Byredo, the list goes on and on. So, yeah, I mean, like, I would say like in the spirit of collaboration and partnership. A lot of what I learned at the big brand at Nike, I've been able to sort of replicate with a much smaller brand, Rocky's Matcha.
Very cool. Wow, you did collaboration with Byredo. It's like
Yeah,
fine fragrance and, with
yeah.
matcha.
Yeah, they asked us, they did a big store opening and product launch in Tokyo, and they asked us to come out and, be a part of it. And yeah, talk about imposter syndrome, like selling
In Japan.
matcha in Japan, with a Swedish brand. No, it was great. And we've done a few things in Tokyo now, and we've been again like fortunate enough to work with like local Japanese brands like a Sakai as well over the years. And like it's been really humbling to have these opportunities and to do these things.
You said something really striking, and it was adding dimensionality to a brand, sort of beyond the traditional spheres in which people think of. And like Rocky's Matcha in particular, like you guys have one of the most iconic matcha brands out there, and it's almost more of a feeling. That dimensionality to me is a feeling. Like the can that you did with Dreaming Man. And for those of you who can't see the video, this is a can that's wrapped, and it almost looks like it came out of an Hermes store, and it feels like French luxury. It's adding dimensions in a way that don't this could like very easily feel tacky or out of place, but it doesn't. So like how do you do that execution? How do you add that dimensionality in a way that feels authentic is the best word I can think of? It's the real magic that you guys sprinkle on like I don't even want to call it the aesthetic because it's more than that. Like I don't have the vocabulary to put it.
No,
Trade
you're
secret, Ryan.
yeah, I mean, I'm just like I think blessed to be able to work with some of the best and brightest minds in the space. The Dreamer Man partnership came together because again, I would go and frequent the coffee shop, and Yuichiro, who's Japanese and from Shizuoka, one of the regions or prefectures that we source from. He never had matcha on the menu because he was like, I don't want to be sort of cornered into like a Japanese owned coffee shop in Paris that sells matcha. When I started doing Rocky's Matcha and was, showing up and doing pop-ups with them, he was like, "Oh no, there maybe is something here. Like, why don't we offer matcha at one of their other locations?" I'm taking a roundabout way to get back to your question, Ryan, but through that, we started working with another friend from Japan, Ryuto Miyake, and Ryuto did the branding for Dreaming Man, and he has since, he or not even since, but he's done so much work over the years. He's worked with Gucci, he's worked with Arc'teryx, he's obviously worked with us and Dreaming Man. And I mean, if you go to his website, you can see all the amazing brands that he's worked with. And so through Dreaming Man, we discovered Rito's work and, became friendly with them. And Max, my business partner, and Max does all of the creative for Rocky's Matcha. We started working with Ryuto and talking to Yuichiro at Dreaming Man, we decided we are like, hey, like maybe there's something that we could do here. Like Dreaming Man's brand, identity is really iconic. We'd love to do something special for you guys because they're the only retailer that we work with in Europe, like really officially. A lot of that is just organic friendship that's grown over the last like 5 years. Yuichiro, of course, was like, all right, well, let's bring on Ryuta. There's just this organic relationship that came about. We honestly just let Ryuto kind of like go crazy. He obviously didn't didn't sort of deviate too much from, like, where we've been in terms of, like, certain things, like, he didn't change the form factor of the tin, he left the logo up at the top of the tin, but then he really applied some of the amazing things that he's done for Dreaming Man to the tin. And so I say all of that to say, like, for us, like, Max, my business partner, is largely responsible for, like, our brand identity, our creative, our like, this sort of feeling that we want to evoke, but also this brand that we want to stand for. And then at the same time, a lot of it is just organic, and working with people that are the best at what they do in the fields that they do, that their practice is in, but maybe they just haven't worked on anything that's either, food related or tea related or obviously matcha related. And then we're just asking them to kind of like bring their point of view to uh to this industry. So yeah.
Interesting.
Creative outlet for some for other people, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there isn't really like kind of like you know, a brand identity guideline that is being set in the beginning, but you kind of offer everyone a platform to kind of add their own interpretation into it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say the only guidelines are that there is somewhat of like we never want anything to feel forced. We always want things to feel organic and natural. And the second that we're not having fun or the second that this feels forced, like I would say we probably say, okay, you know what, like this maybe doesn't make sense at this moment in time. Like we'll push pause and we can always come back to it. But now as we're growing, I would say we're starting to have to put maybe some more guardrails around what it is that we do and all of that. So yeah, we're still super like nimble and young company, and we never wanted to feel too corporate, but obviously as we grow we definitely need to kind of like put more guardrails and parameters in place to make sure that we keep or we upkeep the brand at a certain level.
Something that you guys have done and something you've talked about on other podcasts too is I think you used the term event capture. I'm like really new to this marketing space and world in general. So apologies if that's the wrong lingo, but how do you guys think about those investments and like capturing the content and the people and the way you kind of expose that and share that dimensionality on platforms?
Yeah, I mean, look, we started the brand started like, and even like the logo, right? Or the brand identity, the mark, like the kind of chicken scratch, like that's Max's handwriting. It's not mine, but it's Max's. And it started because this idea or the brief that I gave him was like, hey, like I kind of want this to feel like a lemonade stand. Like when you're a kid and you're hawking lemonade for, 25 cents. Now it's probably $1.50, right? But you're selling lemonade on the side of the road. And that honestly was kind of how we got started. Like we started by doing pop-ups. We started by not having any tins or jars or containers, canisters, whatever you want to call it, for sale. We started by selling matcha at events that sort of aligned with our interests. And a lot of our community, were at those events. And from there, we just decided that like it would make sense, like, from a content perspective, like to be able to share that with everybody, right? Like, and this is like what we're doing. We're looking to build community and engage with our audience a little bit differently. We never wanted to feel like we were speaking down to people. We were, like trying to sort of be on this high horse and, tell everybody that they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to matcha or this and that. Like, if anything, like you want to help educate and also just bring people along for the going back to like the events. I think community is so important to the success of any brand. Again, I think we've just been lucky where, I've made a lot of friends over the years. And this was a space in which, not necessarily like everybody was thinking about food. Or most of my friends have worked in fashion and design and art over the years. And now there's a whole new wave of entrepreneurs that are looking to bring their touch to the food space. One of my other best friends, Pedro was actually the person who introduced Max and I. But Pedro opened Community Goods in 2020, I believe. So it's been about 2 years or 2 plus years now. And, I mean, the name even, it has community in the name of the cafe. Like it's arguably the most successful cafe here in Los Angeles. There's a line down the block at 7 a.m. when they open. But he and I think I think you would agree, but we approach things very kind of like honestly and holistically, and we really want what we're building to represent the community that we come from, or the communities that we come from. And he always wanted to set out and just build a place that his friends could go and get a coffee or a matcha or, a sandwich at, and be able to hang out. And, it's kind of the same for us when we started, which was we wanted to serve a good cup of matcha for great people everywhere. And, our traveling tea house kind of went around the world, from LA to New York to Chicago to Miami to Tokyo, even, so on and so forth. And obviously more recently, Ryan, in Paris, right? And so all of the events, and just being able to share that, with the world, like was something that we thought would be interesting. So yeah, hopefully that answers, your question as far as like event capture, and
Awesome.
Wow, very interesting. So I guess a follow-up question on top of that is, do you usually have kind of like a direction or, certain types of event that you are, actively thinking about to activate? Or you just kind of let, the relationship started organically and, take what?
Yeah, most, if not all, the events that we've done are birthed out of organic relationships. A lot of brands that reach out, now, if there's no sort of direct connection to us or personal connection to me or someone on the team, we respectfully will decline, or we'll just say, hey, maybe this isn't to make the most sense for us at this moment in time. In 2023, going into 24, I think one of my goals for the company was to do an event every month, and I think we probably did more than that.
Uh,
But, now I think it's a matter of, does this event make sense? Who's the event speaking to? Is our audience already thinking about this event? And if not, is it a new audience? How easy is this event or brand that we're potentially going to be working with going to be to work with? We don't want to do things that just, are disingenuous or don't feel right. We don't want to do things that are just, like a money grab or what have you. Like, I think like most of the events that we do, to be honest, like we don't make money on. But for us, it's a way to, celebrate our community, and to, share our love for matcha and design, and, just good organic relationships with one another. I mean, this more recent one that we did in Paris at Dreaming Man, like, this was the third or fourth time that we had worked together. Obviously, we had decided to kind of use this moment to release the collaborative tin that we did together. But, it was just kind of like, let's do something together. It was the day after Fête de la Musique in Paris, and a lot of people were like still maybe hungover or moving a little slow from the night before. And Yuichiro and Yuichiro's partner surprised me, and they're like, "Hey, we actually got the soft serve machine, so we're gonna do matcha soft serve." And I was making matcha, for 6 hours, and we just invited our friends. Ryan came, and a lot of other folks that I, either met briefly or, maybe had not met yet, would come by and just say hi. And it's amazing that, tea can kind of like take you all over the world, and introduce you to people like, the two of you guys, right? So yeah, all that to say, I think like making sure that the event feels like it's an authentic and organic thing for us is probably the most important.
That's awesome.
Most of these things, I wish I could say that they made a lot of money, but they don't. And I think it's okay that they don't, because it's not, the events ultimately, yeah, we would love for all of the events to make a lot of money. But I think
Right.
for the time being, it's more about like continuing to share our passion and love for good, high quality matcha with a growing audience.
Well, as long as everyone is having fun.
What do you want people to feel when they interact with your brand? what's the I don't wanna call it the mission, but, like, what feeling do you want to instill in either the communities that you're tapping into and or the communities that you're building?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, for us, one of the things that we're interested in sort of helping with, whether it's, us or any other matcha or tea brand or coffee brand or, what have you, is like this idea of sort of like building a ritual. Like I wake up every morning, will usually look at my phone even though I've been trying not to, but I'll look at my phone, I'll do a little scrolling, emails, what have you, and then I'll walk into my kitchen and I will make a matcha. And that's how I know my day has started, right? Like, and I think like one of the things that we want to do is to just introduce tea and specifically matcha green tea to the world, and just let them know that this is like in making a cup of matcha at home every day or on the road or getting a cup of matcha at your local cafe is ways to kind of signal to yourself that like the day is starting. It's a moment, especially for me at home, it's a moment of stillness and sort of calmness where I can just have a moment to myself and not think about the million emails or, my long and ever growing to-do list. And it's therapeutic, it's meditative, it's all of these things. And, if we can play a role in offering that moment to all of our customers and our general audience, then, I'd be over the moon.
It's like a personal ceremony.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
feel that.
yeah, yeah. Very, very much so.
If you invert the question, like, what don't you want to be associated with or do? Because, like, you guys feel very contemporary, like your collaborations with Tom Sachs, with all of these brands. Like, it very much feels like a purposeful decision not to wash yourself in traditional Japanese tea ceremony or all of these other things. And what's really interesting that I've noticed on the internet is the number of traditional Japanese matcha players, like Suji-san's Instagram account or Horishi Shimean, that cross post your stuff. And I think you're developing interest from the other side at the way that you approach it, specifically in what you guys are not doing.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you think about that? And is it like hard lines about what you don't want to do or don't want to be perceived as? And it seems to really like draw interest from all sides, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think of like the Japanese tea ceremony as something that's very sacred. I personally have not signed up for tea school, yet, but it's something that I've strongly considered and, would love to find time to go to tea school and like really kind of like learn more about the tea ceremony. I have a general idea and, obviously I've gone and participated in tea ceremonies, but, I don't actually know how to administer it from the sort of like practitioner side. Again, it just goes back to this idea of like being authentic and honest. Like I would never want to sell somebody something that I don't actually um partake in, or am not experienced or um am not, an expert in, right? Like, it's not to say that we can't be someday, but this is again like it's a sacred thing. It's a product of originally from China, but obviously it's been perfected in Japan. And there's so many families and companies, and there's so much rich tradition and what this means in the other side or the other part of the world where we definitely like we don't want to bastardize that. Like that's not who we are. And so I think like where we're able to provide value is to, like with Tsuji-san or with Hori, like, I mean, it took 2 years, I think, before Shunta from Hori Shichi Man like even got back to me. And I think it took us, and I think honestly, like he even told me, he was like, "Oh, I saw that, you were working with Tom Sachs. Like they had done some stuff with Theaster Gates, another artist." And he was like, I really like what you're doing. Like, I think it's cool. And like, yeah, like I would like to find a way for us to work together. And I think it took us, being patient and doing things our way where we would honor and stay true to sort of like the way in which the tea producers and farmers and companies of like more traditional Japanese tea wanted their tea to essentially be consumed. Like we always try to prioritize that. You know, one of the things that I think we never really set out to do is like we don't want to be we're so blessed right now to kind of like be in the position that we're in, you know, because matcha's obviously seen this boom really in the last like 9, 12 months, right? 6 to 12 months. And you know, what we don't want to be is like we don't want to just be a flash in the pan. Like we don't want to just be like this month's flavor, you know, whether it's a mango matcha lassi or a strawberry matcha infused, you know, whatever. Like, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. And I'm not saying that, you know, there's food service cafes or restaurants that want to purchase our product and, you know, make a drink like that. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I think for us, that's just not who we are. And maybe I'm taking a book out of, you know, Zach from Kettle's book, but taking a page out of Zach's book, but like, you know, I've always admired and really looked up to how like Zach and the team at Kettle have built their business because they've really stayed true to it. And, you know, they've been doing this for 15 years. And so I think for us, you know, our maybe unique way of adding value is to stay true, but at the same time, you know, add a little bit of like our sort of background, you know, Max and myself, like our background to what it is that we are offering up to the world.
Very interesting. Wow, it's really Rocky's matcha in a way that's it's about you, Rocky, and your company, your friends, and all that. It's quite interesting
And intuition,
and
because like you
intuition.
I think you've managed to create like a brand that the traditional players, like we can use Hori-san for example, find cool. Because you see a lot of people wrapping themselves in traditional Japanese tea ceremony, and it's just kind of a reboot of repackaging of something that has existed for a long time, and you just move the context, but it actually feels like it's moving the narrative forward. Like with what Tom Sachs did, the tea ceremony, but both Zongjun and I have a Motosenke background. I think Sam studied for about a year and a half. I studied for 3 years. And the first time I saw Tom Sachs' thing, my first thought was, this is ridiculous, right? Like, this is so bastardizing. A little Yoda Pez dispenser for the Wagashi, like filling up things from a fire hydrant. And then you take a second look and you realize, wow, this is such a fresh take. It's forcing me to look at Chanoyu and tea ceremony in a new way because whoever designed this has deep knowledge about tea ceremony. It's hidden in all of the details, and it really forces you to look at something you spent a lot of time moving 2 centimeters, the bowl 2 centimeters to the left, and you're whisking too hard, and you're supposed to turn this way, not that way. It forces you to look at it through a totally new lens, which
Yeah,
is like I really like this idea of contemporary matcha and the
it's
way that can be expressed in new spaces.
it was ridiculous in forms, but it really is in coherence with the idea of symbolisms in Channel U.
Yeah, spirit, not form. How did that Tom Sachs collaboration come about?
Tom and I have known each other and worked together when I was at Nike, and
Cool.
he had this beautiful space that he had been sort of curating and opening up to his network last summer, the bodega space. A close friend of mine was working with him at the time, and you know she had reached out and said like, I think it'd be really cool if you wanted to do something. And another friend, Benjamin Peterson, who also you know is Nike alumni, had he left Nike and started a coffee brand, Black Beach Coffee. And so, you know, Tom had this idea of, you know, as only Tom can do, decided to call it the Morning Constitutional. And, you know, he invited us to, you know, sell matcha and coffee in his bodega, and we did it for a weekend, and you know it was amazing. Yeah, I mean, I never thought in a million years that I'd be able to work with Tom Sachs on something like that, and you know we did it, and so yeah, it was great. But again, organic, authentic, and you know it wasn't forced. Obviously, there are people and brands that we've reached out to that you know have kind of also said no to us. It's not like everyone says yes. I think again, just coming at it from a place of like authenticity and honesty, and hopefully things are organic. Those are the events and the projects that seem to be the most fun, and it doesn't feel like it's forced. It doesn't feel like it's just a a money grab or what have you. Yeah.
What do you mean by authentic? Like, what does authenticity mean to you in this context or in
To
all
me,
contexts?
yeah, I mean, to me, it's just like it's like, are you staying true to yourself, right? Like I'll maybe like rewind or take a step back. Um, we did something earlier this year with a beauty brand. So I don't use makeup, right? I don't, like I know nothing about it. I know that our audience, is probably an audience that purchases makeup and follows various makeup brands, right? Like, there are a lot of young females out there who drink matcha regularly. And, a close friend of mine, one of my best friends here in LA, she works at, one of the, I guess, like fastest growing, but also like authentic sort of like brands in the space, in my opinion. And, the name of the brand is Say. She had reached out and said, like, hey, like, would you ever want to do anything? And I was like, well, I don't know anything about makeup. And she, sort of said, well, like, like let us know. Like she shared some kind of like insights into the brand. And, as I kind of got more familiar and saw a lot of, she does like all the special events for their brand. And I saw what she was doing, which was bringing, makeup along this journey of like positioning it with like really good design, whether it be mid-century modern furniture or homes or different things, and like doing and curating their events in a very chic way that a lot of beauty brands hadn't done before. I was like, well, there's a lot of similarity in what you're doing and the way that you're positioning your brand with our brand, like in what we're trying to do. And that's where we kind of found alignment. And so, like going back to this question of like what does it mean to be authentic? And like for me, it's like we didn't necessarily know anything about makeup. Like Max and I like don't know like, what is a good makeup brand versus not. But like what we did know is that like here's a brand that one, we had a very organic relationship with because of, my relationship with Misha, my close friend who works there. And two, what they were trying to do in their space mirrored what we were trying to do in our space.
Mm,
And that's where we found like common ground. And, to be honest, like that was probably, even though it wasn't necessarily like, a partnership that I knew super well, from the sense of like I didn't know all the ins and outs of Say Beauty versus like a Dreaming Man or a Tom Sachs or, what have you. I learned a lot along the way. And honestly, to this day, that might have been our most successful partnership or collaboration. Like was doing this project with Say. And so, yeah, I think like the authenticity bit is like staying true to yourself, but like, it's easy to say now, hey, we would have done that project, 100 times out of 100 times because of all the sort of virality or, social media engagement that came out of that. But at the same time, like, hindsight's 2020, like it's easy to say that now. Like we know that we would have done it again just because our brand like vision like for our two brands separate of one another were aligned, and we're authentic in that sense, and that's why it made sense to work together, not just because like, oh, they were like, this preeminent beauty brand that's now in Sephora and all these places, and we are debatably like a cool matcha brand, and we wanted to come together, and matcha is this cool thing right now. Like that's not the reason. Like
mm,
we decided to work together because there was a personal relationship, but at the same time there was a very authentic and organic relationship between the two. And I would also just add like Lainey, the founder and CEO of Say, she drinks matcha every day, and she tried different matchas. And
Mutually,
so
yeah.
yeah, it's mutual, right? And so, I guess maybe to take it just one step further, like because I feel like we've spent a good amount of time just talking about like partnerships and collaborations. The one thing that I always think about is like, okay, if we are going to do something together, is this a 1 + 1 = 3 type of
mm,
equation, or are we solving a problem, right? Like,
mm,
could either brand have done this without the other? And it has to be, not only authentic and like sort of like honest to both brands, but at the same time, like, you know, is it mutually beneficial for both people? And sometimes it might not be, and I think that's okay. You might know, like, hey, in the back of your head, like, I'm doing this as a favor for someone, or I'm doing this because, I just want to do it, right? I think for the most part, like good collaboration, like really, looks to answer a challenge or a question, and yeah.
Interesting. Did this kind of mentality also imbued into how you source matcha back in the days or till nowadays? And like, what's your sourcing philosophy? And maybe like, what was your original story of sourcing matcha? Is kind of like
Yeah,
a question that
we
we will ask for all the guests.
yeah, yeah, I mean, look, I think that, I think we've probably gotten incredibly lucky because we started this in 2022 and, we were sourcing matcha, or I was visiting Japan in 22 before Japan really even opened back up to the world. And through, various kind of like friends that I'd met over the years, I got introduced to Tsuji-san, and, I'd done some like research on the internet to find like essentially like brokers that would help. Through the brokers we would meet the producers, and then once we met the producers we'd show them like what we are doing. you know um for me, the philosophy is like, do the producers that we work with share a passion and a commitment to developing and delivering, like quality product? And if they do, then, I think there's a world in which we can work together. And, if they don't, then we wish them the best and they probably wish us the best, or hopefully, and we kind of go about it on our own ways. But yeah, I think we got really lucky where, now if you're going out and you want to start a matcha brand, it's probably harder and harder because you don't know the regions to even go look at. You don't know the producers. And we're still in the process of sourcing, right? Like we're still looking for new producers and suppliers and, what have you. And I would just say we are looking, a lot of it just starts, with a search on the internet. And then from there, we typically will like to go and meet with the producer, and then, we'll ask for samples. And then from there, they'll either ship us samples or they won't. Or, sometimes producers have even come all the way to Los Angeles, not to specifically visit with us, but because, they want to expand their business here, and they've heard that matcha is obviously growing quite a bit in the US. And, I think like over 80% of it is exported to the US. And so, some producers will ship directly to cafes or food service, or, maybe they want to set up a distribution company or what have you. But yeah, I think it all just kind of like goes back to, Brian, you and Sam both said this, but like when people see our brand, we've been lucky to be around for, going on 3 years or 3+ years now. So there is a catalog or an archive of things that we've done that you can find on the internet. So it's not like we're just starting from scratch. It's not like, we saw this opportunity in matcha and we want to, just go and kind of like take advantage of it, right? That's not the case. So there's that. And then there's also, I think, the part where, we're not looking to bastardize it. Like we're not looking to, take something that is very pure and honest and has so much tradition to it, and sort of, we're looking to maybe recontextualize it, but we're not looking to reinvent it, and we're not looking to take any shortcuts. So yeah, that's where I think maybe we've been fortunate. But yeah, it's definitely, it's definitely been quite the experience. And, some producers, we found, don't make sense for us, without naming like names. But, there was a producer recently that we didn't feel like we had been doing business with them for well over a year. And, this last, a few months ago, we had gone to go visit with them, and they saw the boom in the matcha industry, and you could argue that they were getting greedy, and, they wanted to raise their prices. Cool, no problem. But then they also wanted to change all of their terms, and they wanted to basically not offer any guarantees in terms of, what we had been able to purchase the previous year versus this year, because, they're essentially saying that they wanted to open it up for bidding. And then, they're like, oh, and by the way,
Wow.
like, we can't guarantee that like what you purchased last year you can purchase this year. And, we can't guarantee that, we can ship you everything on time and this and that. And we're just like, you know what, like,
They would
I think
That's
never
we're
apply
crazy.
in any other industry.
Yeah.
You can't
yeah, I mean,
guarantee how
look,
much or when you will get it.
I also get it because this is something that's, completely unprecedented, and farmers and producers have not made the most money over the years, right? So I also see it from their perspective, like this is an opportunity to cash in and make a significant amount of money. And I think there's a way to do it, and there's a way not to do it. And I wish that producer nothing but the best, and hopefully their business continues to do well. But I think just for us, it didn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
Like it didn't make sense to kind of like continue working with someone who seemed to not be able to stand behind their word. And then there's also producers that we have like very, very, very strong relationships with. Our friends at Osada, Seicha, and Shizuoka, they're great. Like Yugo, who's our contact there, he and I met at a tea conference in Las Vegas of all places. I happened to be in Japan like maybe like a week or two after that tea conference, and he was like, "Why don't you come to Shizuoka?" And I did, and now literally, I pretty much go visit them like every single trip. One, because it's closest to Tokyo, but two, like Yugo and I have developed like a very kind of like just like genuine friendship over the last like couple of years. And we're at a point where we're talking to them about how we can even support them a step further in addition to just buying the product from them. But it's like, okay, what are some things that we can do for you guys? Like, do you need most people, I think, like, or most businesses in Japan are somewhat conservative, but we're saying to them, like, are there things that we can do, whether it's like additional capital or resources that we can kind of like devote to what you guys are building, because we believe in what you are producing here and the way in which you're going about your business. And also, maybe the last thing I would say is like, there's another producer of not matcha, but just, matcha or teaware, right? Suikaien, they are a
Oh yeah.
6th generation, chasen maker in Nara. But we, I don't even know if they know this yet, but like I told them this, we just haven't like actually like we're gonna wait till maybe like year end to follow through on it. But like, Kay, who's our friend there, who like went to college in the US, moved back to Japan, was working at A6, left A6 to go back into the family business to preserve this kind of like centuries, long multi-century craft that's been preserved in his family. Like he went back, gave up his, like modern job to go back to the family business in the countryside to do this. Like there's a dedication on his side to want to preserve what his family has been building. And for us, it's easy to say like, "Oh, yeah, like we can purchase, whatever it is that they're producing, whether it's the chasens, whether it's, the whisk stands or what have you." But, like, there's so much history there that, like, it deserves to be kind of preserved and kept intact. And so one of the things that we wanna do is we actually wanna take the majority, if not all of the profits that we make from selling their products and give it back to them so that they can continue to hire essentially more people in Nara to educate them about, the process in which
Wow. Yeah.
what they're what they're doing. They when we first visited with them maybe like a year ago, they could only make 7 chasens a day. And then this more recent visit, they are now able to make, I think, like 20 or so. And the hardest thing for them is they can't find people to educate and teach and, sort of like, it's very technical, right? And so like for us, like it's not like we sell a million of, what they're able to produce. Like we sell what we're essentially allocated. And, for us, it's like that money would go a lot further with them so that they can preserve, what it is that they're putting out into the world, versus us here in the US. So, those are the things that I think we think about when it comes to sourcing. I think a lot of it, is, or some of it is derived from, what we see in the coffee industry, where a lot of like the more contemporary and modern coffee brands, they always talk about being able to kind of like pay not just a fair wage, but like beyond a living wage for people within their supply chain. And that's something that we want to do too, right? Like it's a product that a lot of us have become obsessive over. And, if that's the case, like the people that have helped make it possible along the way deserve to reap some of the benefits along the way. Yeah, that's the way that I think we're thinking about it or looking at it.
Yeah.
This MO really cuts both ways. It's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank
It's
you.
really just not about business or business relationship.
It's something that's been, matcha's been around for 1,000 years, and hopefully it's going to be around for 1,000 more. And I think we owe it to those who, came before us and paved the way to compensate and also like just share in the current reward or the current state of the market.
All right. Kind of the last question for this podcast. So Rocky, any interesting or exciting upcoming events or new collaboration that we can stay tuned and be looking forward to?
Yeah, we I guess the one that's the more imminent one that's on the horizon is family style food festival. So kind of a full circle moment for us where Verdi the multi hyphenate creative that who is my friend Paulo who kind of gave us the name Rocky's Matcha. Verdi's the his is Paulo's business partner. He is the creative director for this year's Family Style Food Festival in Los Angeles. So that's taking place September 13th. So we'll be participating in Family Style. And then, as we look ahead to 2026, we definitely have, a number of things I think on the horizon. There's nothing kind of etched in stone yet, but we're taking days or excuse me, we're taking things one day at a time. And I think above all else, we're trying to solidify our business, really like the core business, which is, selling tins of matcha online and, all of the other opportunities that have kind of come our way. We're seeing and assessing what makes the most sense. But yeah, I mean, I think the goal would be to continue to try and do one event a month. And then I think, one of the other things is like we've done a lot of events or repeat events in kind of like bigger cities that we have a home or have friends in, whether it's LA, New York, Paris, Tokyo, even, right? One of the things that I think we're challenging ourselves with is can we look to bring our brand to some other, secondary cities or tertiary cities, maybe here in the US first. So thinking about some of the sort of like food service cafes and restaurants that we work with and maybe partnering up with them to do something in their respective city or what have you. So yeah, a lot of exciting things. We have a young and hungry and super hardworking team. And we're excited about the future, and hopefully I think the industry continues to grow and everybody gets to take or everybody gets to reap the benefit of the growing industry to some extent or another.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Very
that's
exciting too.
exciting times in general. Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate your time. I'm very happy I bumped into you at Yugen
Yeah.
in Kyoto. It was, so
A
I
magical
almost didn't
moment.
come up and say hello, but, I was,
Yeah,
like,
I'm
totally sure.
no, it's the second time that I think I've run into somebody there at Yugen. So shout out to Yugen in Kyoto. Beautiful tea shop and tea wear store.
Yeah.
So yeah, and thank you, Ryan, for coming to the pop up in Paris as well.
Oh, it was awesome.
Hopefully we can do this in person when you guys launch your product in the coming months or whenever it is. But wishing you guys the best of luck with all of that. And I'll be tuning in for more exciting episodes. Yeah, if there's anything else you guys need along the way, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks so
Awesome. Thank
much.
you so much.
Really
Cool.
appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you so much for listening to our audience, and if you enjoyed this, please consider sharing it with a friend, and we'll see you in the future. Thanks.
See you in the future.